She blinked again, slower this time, as if understanding was assembling itself piece by piece. You generate extreme heat. I try, he said with a smirk. It's kind of my thing. She closed her eyes again. Not unpleasant. There was a long pause. You know, he said, that's maybe the nicest thing anyone said to me since I crash-landed. Also the weirdest. But it's a short list. The wind howled outside, trying to pry apart the edges of their meager shelter. Snow tapped against the emergency tarp he'd pitched earlier like skeletal fingers. The tent wasn't designed for two, especially not with one of them being a statuesque alien who radiated dignity even while half dead and swaddled in nylon. Ash reached for the corner of a ration bar with one hand, the other still locked awkwardly around her waist. So, he said between bites, you got a name? Or should I keep calling you Princess Frostnip? She opened her eyes again, lips moving slowly. Her voice was weaker now, barely above a whisper. Saria. Nice. Sounds fancy. I'm guessing it means something in your language. Starlight Dancer, or Frozen Destiny, or Don't Talk to Me Until I've Had My Meteor Coffee. She stared at him. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna shut up. Wise, she murmured, but there was the faintest twitch of her lips, almost a smile. Almost. They lay there in silence for a while, save for the occasional shift of limbs and the rustle of synthetic fabric. Her breathing evened out, and warmth slowly began to spread between them like a fragile miracle. Ash closed his eyes. Just for a minute, then her stomach growled. He blinked. Was that you? She looked vaguely embarrassed. I have not eaten in a solar rotation. Perfect. That's only slightly more dramatic than me. Hang on, I think I've got something that might pass for food. He fished out a ration pack and offered it. She examined it like it might bite her. You consume compressed nutrient gel voluntarily? Only on special occasions, like Tuesdays, or near-death snuggle parties with alien royalty. She tried to eat it, grimaced, took another bite with the stoicism of someone who'd endured worse. Ash leaned back, or tried to, and winced as the sleeping bag seam dug into his hip. So, he said, glancing at the broken remains of her ship visible through the tent flap. Any chance you've got, like, a backup ride in your pocket? Saria looked at him with faint amusement. Do you? Touché. Outside, the wind screamed again and the cold pressed closer, but inside their shared warmth held steady. For now. Ash woke up to the gentle sensation of his nose being flicked by something not quite human. At first, his brain refused to process it. It was too early, too cold, and his dreams had just reached the part where pizza delivery drones were returning to Earth's orbit. But then the sensation returned, more deliberate this time. Flick. Flick. His eyes opened to find Saria staring at him, her long silver fingers tapping lightly against his face as though she was testing whether he was fully operational. Is this how your species initiates wake cycles? She asked, voice soft and disturbingly sincere. I mean, some use alarms, some use coffee, some get poked in the face by alien fingers. It's a diverse culture. She leaned back slightly, the motion limited by the stubbornly intimate confines of their sleeping bag. You made a noise. It sounded like predatory whining. A death alert. You mean snoring? If that is the term. Yes. He sighed, rolling onto his side and peeling himself slowly away from her. The interior of their makeshift shelter smelled like old socks and warm plastic, with an undertone of toasted ration bar. One of the tarp walls fluttered in the wind like it wanted to file a formal complaint. I'll have you know, he muttered, sitting up and stretching his arms until his shoulders cracked like brittle branches. My snoring once lulled an entire outpost to sleep, like an angry lullaby. Saria didn't respond immediately. She was fiddling with the remains of her translator bracelet, turning it over in her hands and tapping through flickering glyphs that looked like they were borrowed from a futuristic opera. Any progress with the universal babble fixer? I have overridden the semantic processor using a subroutine from your satellite transmission files. Unfortunately, the only stable dialect is derived from humorous drama. Ash paused, mid-chew on a protein biscuit. Wait, are you saying your translator only works if it mimics sitcom dialogue? Yes. He laughed. Not a small chuckle, but a genuine shoulder-shaking laugh that echoed off the tarp like a rebellion against the cold. Great! So what, now every time I ask you a serious question, you're going to answer like a confused ant from a 1980s space comedy? Possibly. Her deadpan expression only made it better. He fell onto his back, wheezing. Oh no! This is how humanity ends. Not with a bang, but with a laugh track. While Ash tried to regain composure, Syria returned to calibrating the bracelet. Every few seconds, a short audio clip would burst from the device. Laughter, applause, the sound of someone being hit with a rubber chicken, followed by a brief translation of whatever command she'd entered. It was only marginally helpful. Still, it was progress. Outside, the wind was quiet for the first time in days, the deadly kind of quiet. The kind that suggested the cold wasn't retreating, just biding its time. Ash pulled on his jacket and stepped out from under the tarp, boots crunching against brittle frost. The sky was a weird shade of lavender, the kind that made you feel like you'd fallen into the middle of a magazine ad for a luxury cryogenic service. He scanned the horizon. Her ship's wreckage still lay half-buried in the snow, like some ancient fossil too pretty to forget. His own pod had landed miles away. He'd left it behind when its battery failed and the automated toilet tried to electrocute him. Long story. He returned to camp with a handful of salvaged alloy tubing and a handful of frozen mushrooms he was half sure weren't poisonous. Syria examined them with a raised brow ridge. These are fungal spores adapted to cryogenic soil layers. So, edible? If we neutralize their neurotoxins, possibly. See, you always know how to make a meal sound exciting. Together, they set up a crude heating element using one of the still-functional repulsor coils from her ship's wing flap and the wire from Ash's broken glove heater. It sparked once, then again, before settling into a faint hum and the gentle, joyous smell of not-quite-toxic stew. As the food cooked, they sat side by side on a folded tarp, sharing body heat without comment. The silence between them had evolved. Less awkward now, more companionable. Ash took a bite of stew, winced, and pretended it tasted like something other than lightly seasoned regret. I used to hate quiet, he said. Grew up in a megacity. Noise was everywhere. Traffic, drones, people yelling about deals on biosocks. You'd think I'd love peace and quiet after all that. But this planet, it's like being trapped in a snow globe built by a sadist. Syria watched him with unreadable eyes. My homeworld has cities layered vertically. Silence is impossible. I found it disorienting here at first. But now, she paused, I am beginning to find it tolerable, particularly the parts where you speak less. Ash held a hand to his heart. I knew we were bonding. Just admit it, Syria. You'd miss me if I froze into a meat popsicle. Her head tilted slightly. I would have to share the sleeping bag with your corpse. That would be inefficient. Okay, not exactly the warm response I was hoping for, but I'll take it. They ate in relative silence after that, except for occasional remarks about the stew's alarming texture and Syria's critique of his cooking, which involved phrases like culinary malpractice. After the meal, they spent the next few hours scavenging. Her ship's systems were mostly fried, but they managed to cobble together a basic scanner with limited range, just enough to confirm that, yes, they were still alone. They argued briefly about the purpose of a mysterious device she'd pulled from the wreckage. It had blinking lights and was shaped like a handheld harp, but according to Syria, it was a personal hygiene module. Ash insisted it looked more like a musical weapon. In the end, they agreed it was probably both. Night fell too fast on Cortex 9. One moment the sky was painted in alien hues. The next, blackness rolled over everything like spilled ink. The temperature dropped with it. They huddled in the sleeping bag again, limbs bumping awkwardly. Syria spoke without turning. We must build a signal booster. My ship's black box may have retained quantum resonance protocols. Ash shifted. You've been holding out on me. I only remembered during neural rest. You mean a nap? Number neural rest. Right. Totally different. Of course. A long pause. Their breath mingled in the confined space. Do you think anyone's looking for you? He asked quietly. Yes, but the question is when they will stop. Ash thought of his own people. He wasn't sure anyone was looking for him at all. He didn't say it. Syria reached for the edge of the sleeping bag and pulled it tighter. Tomorrow, she said, we will begin building the array. Ash nodded. Great. We'll science our way out of this. Like heroes. Freezing, underfed, sleep-deprived heroes. She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough or both. Then she added, and possibly poisoned by mushrooms. Hey, he whispered, if I die, avenge me. I will make your stew slightly better. He smiled into the dark. The cold pressed close, but for now it didn't win. By the time the signal array stood finished, it resembled something between an abstract sculpture and a mechanical octopus having a midlife crisis. Twisted antennae jutted from the snow like frozen tendrils, held in place by scavenged hull plating and a whole lot of hope. Syria stood beside it, tapping a sequence into the control node. Ash, meanwhile, was arguing with a piece of wire that refused to accept its role in the grand plan of their salvation. I swear, he muttered, teeth chattering, this wire is sentient and spiteful. It's like it knows I flunked electrical maintenance. It is standard alloy-fused filament. It lacks sentience, Syria said calmly. Yeah, that's what the toaster said before it burned down my dorm. With a final spark and a celebratory beep that sounded suspiciously like a sneeze, the array activated. Lights blinked in a pattern far too smug for inanimate objects, and a narrow band of signal pulsed skyward through the thick clouds. Syria stepped back and exhaled. Transmission is stabilizing. Signal will reach my fleet within 1 solar hour. Ash blinked. That's fast? You sure it won't call the wrong people, like space pirates or galactic telemarketers? Unless your kind has recently acquired quantum entanglement drive tech, I believe we are safe. Fair. Though knowing Earth, someone's probably trying to sell NFTs of alien ears by now. They returned to the shelter, which now resembled less of a tent and more of a communal blanket fort for 2 stubborn life forms clinging to warmth and sarcasm. Ash ducked inside first, clutching the last half of a ration bar like it was the crown jewel of Terran cuisine. So, he said between bites, when your people get here, what happens next? I mean, do I get a medal? Diplomatic immunity? A lifetime supply of interstellar hot cocoa? Syria sat beside him, folding her legs with practiced elegance. You will be debriefed, assessed, possibly interrogated. Sounds cozy. She looked at him, a flicker of something softer beneath her steady gaze. You saved my life, Ash. That will not be forgotten. Well, to be fair, I mostly just got in your personal space and didn't die. That too. They shared a moment of silence, the kind that wasn't heavy or awkward, just full of the things they didn't quite know how to say. Then Ash coughed and rubbed his neck. So I've been thinking, when your people show up with their fancy ships and actual heating systems, you'll go back to wherever it is you came from. Tall buildings, vertical cities, endless noise, probably way fewer fungus-based stews. That is correct. And I'll go back to wherever I go, which currently is nowhere. You have no assignment? I had one. Then the crash kind of reshuffled my itinerary. Now I'm freelance freezing artist. She didn't smile, but her ears twitched slightly, which he'd come to interpret as her version of amused. You could request passage with my fleet, she said quietly. He looked at her. Seriously? An allied species assisting a diplomatic envoy is not unheard of. There are protocols. I don't know your language, your culture. I barely understand your food synthesizer. You learned to operate it after it exploded in your face. That's true. I do grow from trauma. She reached into her satchel and retrieved the malfunctioning translator bracelet. With a few taps, she adjusted its settings. When she spoke again, the voice was smoother, less sitcom, more soft-spoken diplomat. You are not obligated, but I would not object to your continued presence. Ash stared at her. That's the closest thing to affection I've ever heard you say. Do not let it go to your head. You are still inefficient with tools. That's emotional honesty in your language, isn't it? Possibly. They laughed, and the sound filled the shelter with something warmer than the heater coils ever could. An hour later, the sky cracked open. Not literally, but the clouds split apart with such synchronized precision that Ash briefly considered divine intervention. Then he saw the lights, columns of gold and violet descending from a ship so massive it blotted out a quarter of the sky. Syria stood first, straightening her uniform and adjusting the collar with a gesture that said this was the moment she'd been waiting for. Ash stood too, brushing snow off his jacket that still bore the stain of an exploded protein bar. A voice crackled in her ear, sharp, melodic, full of consonants that sounded like ice tapping glass. She responded in her native language, her words crisp and efficient. When she turned to him, her expression had shifted. Formal now, reserved, but her eyes still held that same gleam. They're sending down a recovery pod, medical, decontamination, debrief. Cool, Ash said. Do I get to skip the part where they prod me with science sticks? I will request minimal prodding. That's all I ever ask. The pod landed nearby with a graceful hum. Doors opened and figures emerged, tall, elegant, wrapped in shimmering suits with those same long ears and eyes that saw too much. One of them stepped forward, scanning Ash with a device that looked like a crystalline lollipop. He appears intact, the figure said, voice tinged with curiosity. He has adapted well, Syria replied. Mostly. Ash raised a hand. Hey, right here. Human dignity, fragile and easily offended. The alien didn't respond, instead handing him a folded garment that looked like it was made from liquid moonlight. Thermal robes, Syria explained. Better than your current attire. Ash sniffed his jacket. Fair. As they prepared to board, he paused, looking back at the broken remnants of their shelter, the wreckage of her ship, the scars in the snow that told their story. It felt surreal, like closing a chapter written in frost and awkward survivalism. Inside the pod, the seats were warm. The air smelled like citrus and something floral. Ash looked around with wide eyes. Okay, your people do luxury crash recovery right. Syria sat beside him. You will have to undergo quarantine, then diplomatic assessment, possibly cultural testing. Do any of those involve karaoke? Unknown, but statistically probable. As the pod lifted, the planet fell away beneath them, white and endless, a place that had tried to kill them both and, in the end, had done something far stranger. It had connected them. Ash glanced at Syria. So, do I get a title or something, like Friend of the Empire or Alien Snuggle Hero? She considered. Perhaps Companion of Contact. He grinned. Sounds fancy. Sounds like a job offer. It might be. The stars welcomed them, and for the first time in weeks, Ash felt warm without needing a sleeping bag.